It's always a wonderful vote of confidence when somebody invites you back a second time. It's kind of the second date, you know. The first date just means you look good. The second date means you could actually carry on a conversation. Wonderful, wonderful to be here. My new book, Main Street Vegan, was mentioned, and it's had some good luck. And part of that luck is so unity. Because, you know, when you live these principles, we're talking today about thoughts and words and actions, and when you get that going for you, even partway, remarkable things happen. Excuse me. I'm a big believer in the part way, because 100% isn't exactly an earth kind of quality. Have you noticed that? They always talk about our hand sanitizer will take care of 99% of all the germs. Nothing is ever 100% on this plane. But because we come from somewhere else, you know, we come from perfection, we keep looking for it here, and we just struggle. We're just beating our heads against the wall when we don't need to. Because miracles happen every day for somebody, and some days for each one of us. Is there anybody in this room who has never had anything like a miracle? Now, I'm not talking necessarily the parting of the Red Sea, but how about evidence of divine power in human affairs? That's the third dictionary definition of miracle. They call it the Christian Science definition, but we can take it. Evidence of divine power in human affairs. Anybody's never had that, ever? Okay, now it's proven. I had one about a year ago. I was working on my book and took a day off. My husband and I did some rather strange things that day. We went to 2 movies. We very often go to a movie on a Saturday, but there were 2 and the timing was just such that we went to one and then we went to another one. And then I needed to buy something at a health food store, so instead of getting on the train at 72nd and Broadway as usual, we walked on up Broadway, but we saw this bus where they were having adoptions of puppies and kittens. I can't walk past puppies and kittens, so we went into the puppy and kitten bus, spent some time there, walked on up toward the health food store, and right there in the middle of the street was Michael Moore. Now this is very cool because Michael Moore is one of the few people on earth who is so famous that he is recognizable from the back. Now, I happen to know that Michael Moore had read one of my earlier books and liked it. He'd written about it in Oprah's magazine. But I didn't want to run up like a fan and go, hoo, I know you, and you sort of know me. So being a sophisticated New Yorker, at least I pretend to be, I've lived in New York for 12 years and I put on the act really well, I took my business card and I gave it to his sister who was with him and just said, he likes one of my books, just tell him hello. And then I heard, Victoria! And following me up the street was Michael Moore. And we started talking. It was so cool. And then we started talking even more because he's getting interested in food and health and that sort of thing, and that's one of the things that I do. So we were talking, and one day, a few weeks later, we were talking on the phone and just happened to mention titles. The title of my book had been changed. When the publisher bought it, it was Main Street Vegan, but they didn't like Main Street. They said, Main Street sounds like the Tea Party. Well, this broke my heart, because I knew this was what my title was supposed to be. But they'd bought it, so they could call it whatever they wanted to call it. And I just mentioned to Mr. Moore, oh boy, this book I was writing was supposed to be called Main Street Vegan. He said, Main Street Vegan? That's so perfect, because everybody thinks Whole Foods Street Vegan, or Hippie Street Vegan. But Main Street Vegan, that's like to kill a mockingbird. And I said, you think so, but I think so, but they don't think so. He said, let me talk to them. The second most amazing experience of my life. First most amazing when Paul McCartney bought me a drink when I was 17. But certainly second, and a very close second, was a 3-way call with my editor and Michael Moore and me, listening to him litigate for my title. Now, I had not been affirming, I am going to walk down the street, run into a major celebrity whom my editor really likes, and have him get me the title that I want. But I've been doing some of the things okay. And that's the wonderful thing about Unity. It's kind of like pants with an elastic waist. You don't have to be absolutely 24 inches every single day. There's a little bit of leeway there. Because that's how God works. You know, we always say, oh, God loves me. And then we say, and I have to do it perfectly. You know what? You love somebody, you love your kids, you want them to do the very best they can. Do they have to do everything perfectly? Of course not. So when I take you flying today on TWA, thoughts, words, and actions, we're not talking perfection. We're talking about commitment and being human and having fun and letting the divine have his way with us. You know, sometimes even when you shut out God, you shut all the doors and windows, there's a little crawl space there that spirit can get through, and you get to see that evidence of divine power in human affairs. Now, I love this TWA acronym because just as Kansas City is the birthplace of unity and the birthplace of me, it was also the birthplace of TWA back in the 1940s and 50s and 60s. Great, big, powerful airline. TWA and Pan Am were practically the only ones that mattered. And when I was a little girl, I can remember that every time we were going to go someplace big and someplace important, it was always TWA. And then it just occurred to me a while back, that stands for something other than Transworld Airlines. That stands for thoughts, words, and actions, which is pretty much unity in a nutshell. Now, we're very big here on thoughts. Who's new? Some people said it's your first time. Anybody? Oh, hi, welcome. Oh, and I also need to say, I am not a regular minister. I am more irreverent than a regular minister. Now, I understand, you know, unity is a little bit outside the norm. I'm over here. So if you don't like me, come back anyway, because, you know, I'm a guest. But we're big on thought. And so sometimes we think that we can force ourselves to think differently. But that's not really how it happens, because the kind of thought that shapes our lives isn't just, I think you have on pretty shoes, although that's a nice thought. I think this purple of these seats is really lovely. Nice thought. Those aren't the kinds of thoughts that are going to change anybody's life. It's these deep convictions which are below the conscious level. So how are we going to get in there and change those? You know, Ernest Holmes, who was the founder of religious science, which is a thought system very similar to unity, it's kind of a sister sort of institution, he said that we transform our lives by something that, for lack of a better word, we call the power of thought. For lack of a better word, because it's much, much deeper than just, ooh, I think I'm going to think something good. What we want to do is to dig deep down and want and wish and intend for our thoughts to line up alongside God's thoughts. One of my favorite Einstein quotes is, I want to know God's thoughts. The rest are commentary. Now, very often when we want something, we think we're supposed to have something, we are sure that we're right. Why are we sure we're right? Because we think it. You know, there's a phrase in the 12-step program when somebody comes in and they're in really bad shape, they say, well, my best thinking got me here. So we got to watch out for our thinking sometimes. And very often, when we think we're supposed to get something, we think this is what we're supposed to have in our lives, maybe it isn't. Now, I've had that happen a few times, but my favorite time was one of these romantic deals. Have you ever really wanted somebody and turned out later maybe that wasn't quite the divine selection? Well, my first husband, rest his soul, passed away in his late 30s. I was in my mid-30s, had a little girl, and all I could think of was putting that family unit back together. There had been 3 pieces, a piece was missing, we needed to get that piece back. And I kept dating people to be the missing piece, and remarkably, nobody wanted to be it. And then I met the perfect person. Absolutely perfect. He was good looking, and he played in a band, and I met him at church. What else could you ask for? Now, his name was Cran, like the berry, and to protect his anonymity, we will just say that his last name was Apple. So we started dating. It wasn't like a stalker deal on my part, but I was much more, shall we say, invested than he was. So I thought, well, that's all right, because I can do all this spiritual stuff and change him. So I started affirming. Victoria, Apple. Mr. and Mrs. Cran Apple happily announced the birth of their first child, Kiwi. And I affirmed, and I affirmed. Cran loves me. We are perfect together. Our wedding date is June 17th. And you know what? June 17th came and went. There was no wedding. So I thought, okay, all the religious traditions, all the spiritual practices are really going the same place. So if the unity bottom line thing is not working, I can try something else. I can expand. I can bring in some of my yoga training, and I can try to get Cran to love me more in the Eastern tradition. So, love is painful, they always said that. Okay. Hare Krishna, Cran, he loves me. Yes, he loves me. Hare Hare. Yes, he loves me. Really loves me. Om Om Shanti. Cran, he loves me. I got really flexible. Got really open-minded. Learned a lot about the Vedas. Ate a lot of curry. And Cran still did not love me. So I thought, you know what it is? I was raised Catholic and unity. I was supposed to be Catholic, but my parents hired this nanny who was unity, and we would go to Mass just long enough to kind of get the gist of the homily and pick up the bulletin and prove we'd been there, and then we'd sneak off to unity. So I thought, that is obviously what is going wrong. I left the one true faith, and I'm not getting what I want. So I have to go back to my roots. Patron Saint Teresa of the Little Flower. I am a horrible sinner deserving of nothing, but if you can overlook that just this once and find it in your heart to ask Mary, to ask Jesus, to ask God, to have Cran love me, I will leave that horrible heathen unity church, and I will give up my membership in Planned Parenthood forever. So help me God. Amen and hallelujah. And you know what? That didn't work either. And it was getting very, very discouraging. It's like, if nothing works, what's the point? So I finally just had to accept that I wasn't supposed to be with the person that I knew I was supposed to be with. And it was really hard. You know what was the hardest? I moved away, and a friend who stayed there in Kansas City said, "Oh, I saw Cran at church holding hands with another woman. Oh, strike me dead, the pain, the pain." But time passed. And you know what I found out a few years ago? You know where old Cran is living now? He is in northeastern Missouri, in a house that he made out of old tires and soda bottles. I live in a high-rise in Manhattan. God loves me so much that despite what I thought I needed, what I thought was good for me, God knew to say no, or I would be in a tire house. So thinking, let's elevate those thoughts. Let's elevate those thoughts beyond our little ego thinking to what's bigger. How can we expand? And when your thoughts are in the right place, it's much easier to speak the words that are going to create the life that you want. See, in Unity, we know that words are not just communicative, they're also creative. They have power. When you say the same thing over and over again long enough, you start to believe it. It's also important that we start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. Sometimes people come into Unity and they immediately want to skip over the basics and get to the big, powerful stuff. Sort of like, yeah, don't tell me the little thing, just tell me the part where I get to say, I have a 52-room mansion by the sea. That's where they want to start. But that's kind of like a first grader saying, give me calculus or I'm not coming to school. First you have to learn how to count. So in terms of the words that we speak, the very most important thing in the basic level is that we tell the truth. And I'm not talking the capital T truth and the truth is God. I'm just talking the plain old basic real world kind of truth. Do you remember the first time you ever told a lie? Does anyone remember that? I so remember. Oh, it was this turning point, this kind of downward turning point in my life, actually. You know how little tiny children are just so special? They're kind of 1 foot on earth and 1 foot still in heaven. The Waldorf school people talk about they're just so delicate and so wonderful that we want to just give them natural things to play with and natural foods to eat in a beautiful environment. And don't put them on the computer when they're 6 months old. Give them time to just ease into this life. And I was like 5 years old. I was in kindergarten. And I came home from school, and my wonderful Unity nanny said, as she did every day, what did you do at school? I always said, well, we colored, we did Dick and Jane, and it was starting to seem so boring that I just felt the need to gild the lily. And I said, today at school, we rode horses. And as soon as I said that, I felt sullied. Something had shifted. It was a little bit like Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Pre-apple, post-apple. That was me. Now, I had heard the 10 Commandments, and I'd heard that one that said, do not commit adultery, and nobody would tell me what that meant. But after I told that lie, I thought, this must be that one. Because I feel like an adult, but not in a good way. There's something very powerful about stating the truth as you know it. One of my favorite books is called The Answer to Addiction. A lovely man named John Burns wrote that book. And there's a line in there that I memorized when I read the book 30 years ago and have it in my mind to this very day. He said, God is truth. And you get to God by means of the truth. And you get to the truth by not lying. So, don't lie. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to your husband or wife. Don't lie to your boss. Don't lie to the IRS. Just don't lie. And when you fail, as you will, make amends, start over, but don't fail any more often than you have to. End quote. Thank you, Mr. Burns. I love that. It's very, very clear. Because we can use a lot of energy saying, well, okay, now wait a minute. So it's not really, really true, but maybe if I just kind of tell it this way, and then, but don't tell him, because if I tell it this way and then you tell it that way, that could be really bad. Let's just tell the truth. Now, I'm not talking about the, I think you've gained weight. That's not truth. That's mean. Some things just should not be said. But when it is time to speak, you want your words to pass through those old 3 gates of gold. Did anybody's grandmother ever tell you this? Your words are supposed to be true and necessary and kind. So basically, we're just going to tell the truth. And then we're going to move up to the little bit more advanced class and have an understanding that in the divine, there can be a difference between the truth, the capital T, eternal truth, and the little facts that change all the time. So let's say you're not having the world's best day, and somebody says, "How are you?" Do you have to say, "Well, frankly, I'm late on rent. My boss is just having fits. I've had this headache for 2 days." Do you have to say all that? No, because in truth, all that is passing. All that is passing. So you can just say, "This is a beautiful day, and how's yours going?" It helps a lot when you want to elevate your words to a higher level to be around people who speak positively and who do this kind of thing too. That's why being in a church like this is so wonderful, and getting to know people, not just for Sunday, but for all the time. Now, I have a wonderful, positive friend that I talk to every single day, and I didn't know how positive she was when we started talking. I have to say, in the beginning, she was kind of so positive, it just was like chalk on a blackboard. Don't be so positive. Because I would say to her, "Hey, Sherry, how you doing?" And she'd say, "Blessed and highly favored." Ooh. And I'd think, fine, would do. Fine. That's a nice positive word. But over time, I got used to blessed and highly favored. And I came to see that if she can be blessed and highly favored, I can be blessed and highly favored. We're all supposed to be blessed and highly favored because God doesn't play favorites. And then at the end of the call, I'd say, "Have a good day, Sherry." And she'd go, "Have your best day ever." And now I expect that. And when I hear it, I think, you know what? This could be it. This could be the best day ever. Every morning now, when I wake up, there's this glorious possibility. This one right now today, this could be the best day ever. It's just so cool. And then you start to listen to your own words. What words do you really like? What word, every time you hear it, does it make you feel good? Do you have a favorite word? Do you have an uplift word? I do. My favorite word is irrepressible. Because what that tells me is, yes, I can get down, but as God is my witness, as Scarlett O'Hara would say, I'm not going to stay down. I love that idea of irrepressible. So you can use my word if you want. You can have your own word. And just when things are not looking so great, just bring that word to mind. We have this wonderful library within us of all of our positive words, of our beautiful music, of the lovely pictures, places you've traveled, places you've been, times in nature, sweet times with another person. All that is there for you. When things start to look a little bit not so hot, you draw on that and bring it into the mix. And then you're able to align your thoughts and your words and let those inspire your actions. Now, sometimes in New Thought, we kind of poo-poo action because that's just, everybody's out there doing action. But how about doing bold action? Now, we're a tithing church in Unity. We have learned through experience that in giving 10% of our financial intake, we get more back. It's really remarkable what happens when you start to tithe your money. I love to read about the famous tithers. John D. Rockefeller, from the time he was a little boy, you could see in his ledger, he would say, "Received from Father, 0.10. Given to church, 0.01. By the end of his life, John D. Rockefeller gave away over $750 million. I said that once in a church, and a guy in the back said, "Wow," and that was when $750 million was real money. But the man that started Amway, he and his wife committed to one another on their wedding day that they would tithe in good times and bad, no matter what. Well, they ended up with Amway. The Kraft cheese fellow was a tither, and he said it was the only business investment he ever made that never went bad. So it's a great thing, but how about bold action? I've just come up with something in the past couple of months that I call inspired tithing. Now here's how it works. Let's say you make $80,000 a year, and as that comes in, you give your 10%, and you end up with your $8,000 given at the end of the year, and that's fabulous and wonderful. But let's say you've been making $80,000 for the past 10 years, and you really want to break 100. Here's inspired tithing. Plan in your budget for that year that you're going to give $10,000. You're going to tithe from what you want the universe to give you instead of from what it just did. Now, if you want to cheat God the next year and take the $2,000 extra away if it doesn't work, that's all fine. But how about bold action? How about tithing on what you want instead of on just what you have? That's a bold statement to the universe of, I believe that what I want is coming to me. I believe it is possible, and if I believe it, it can be. Now, there's all kinds of action, all kinds of important action, and very often it doesn't seem important. It seems little. It's just doing the next thing that life presents. And when you do that, things happen that are a little bit extraordinary. A year ago, I brought a brand new MacBook Air. Now, I live in New York City where you carry your whole life in a bag, and the idea that they are making a laptop that hardly weighs anything was just so cool. But as you have noticed out there in the world, the smaller and the lighter stuff gets, the more they can charge for it. So one of those MacBook Airs can set you back like $2,000. And I just bought this thing, and I loved it, and it was silver, and it was cute. And I went down to the village, and I was writing, just starting to work on the book, and had a nice writing time, and lots of things planned for the rest of the day. And I'm walking down the street, and I got this little kind of God thought, and it was as I was walking past a luggage store. And the little God thought was, you should really go into that luggage store and get yourself a bright pink computer sleeve, because you're carrying around this expensive piece of equipment in this black sleeve. You could just sit it down somewhere and leave it there. And I said, God, brilliant idea, as your ideas always are. However, I have to go to the grocery store, and I have to go to the dry cleaners, and I have to get home to see a client. So the next time I pass by a luggage store, I'll go in and I'll get a bright pink computer sleeve. So I did all my other errands. I stopped before I got into the subway to text my husband to tell him I have all these bags and things now. Can you meet me at the train and help me carry the bags? It's all fine. I'm being so efficient. Check, check, check. And I'm standing there in the subway with all my bags around me. I kind of felt like a mom with 8 or 9 kids. Let's see. There's Jenny, and there's Larry, and there's, wait a minute, somebody's missing. The somebody missing was my brand new MacBook Air. When I had stopped to do the text, it was leaning against the fence. I got off the subway, I got back on one going downtown, and I went to where I had been. God. There are a lot of homeless people on that corner, and I was asking all of them, did you see anything? Did you see anybody? No, nobody saw anything. I went to the police, I put signs up all over, but oh my gosh. The devastation. Number one, I didn't have another $2,000 sitting around earmarked another computer. It wasn't covered by anything. It wasn't on the homeowner's policy. I had this book to write. I was thinking, what if I have to write it on big cheap tablet? What will I do? And then there was the guilt that I should have bought that bright pink case, but I didn't. And then there was the unity guilt. What is wrong with my consciousness that this thing would happen to me? And so it was just like, I was just gone. It was like my soul left. And you know how it is? I don't know. Some people react to things differently. Some people just get angry or belligerent. When something like that happens to me, I get lethargic. anybody else in the bad things lead to lethargy. All I wanted to do in all the world was go home, get in bed, pull up the covers, and have nothing showing but my clicker arm. SVU. Every episode from number 1, September 20th, 1999, to the present day. And when I finished watching all those Law and Order SVUs, I could start over and watch them again. But there's just a tiny little bit too much unity in me, just a tiny little bit too much unity in me. So the next morning I actually did get out of bed and I went down to the office of the Unity Church in New York City, and one of the wonderful guys was there, and he just sat me down and talked to me, and he told me truth. He told me how everything was in divine order and everything was really fine. And I was exactly where I was supposed to be, and my $2,000 MacBook Air was exactly where it was supposed to be, and that the hand of God was in this somewhere. And I thought, oh yeah, you've read all the books and you're spitting it all back at me. But at least I was there, and at least I was hearing. Well, that night I had to go do something. I didn't want to do something. I had to MC a panel for this film called Forks Over Knives. Has anybody seen that? Great film about getting healthy. And you know, when I get lethargic and upset and mad at God and everything, I don't want to go help somebody else. But okay, all right, I said I'd be there, so I show up. My soul is still somewhere else, but the shell of me showed up, and I did what I was supposed to do, and I watched the film, which I'd already seen, but it uplifted me somewhat, because it was showing me that people can change. They can change their health, they can change their lives. All sorts of miracles are possible in this world. So I did it, and the next day I went about my life like you're supposed to. And then, about 2 in the afternoon, the phone rang. I picked it up, and this young woman says, "This is the best call you're going to get all day." I said, "You've got my computer." She said, "Well, my boyfriend has it." Now, he was going to keep it, but I told him he should give it back to you. And I said, "Oh, thank you. Oh, my God, you're an angel. Where do I come? Where do I meet you?" She said, "Well, what's in it for me?" I said, "There's a $500 reward. That's on all the signs. You know, happy to bring that." She's like, "How about 7?" I said, "Okay, but if you want 7, I have to go to the bank." She said, "Call me from the bank when you've got the money." And she gave me her cell phone number. So I go to the bank. I'm standing in the line. The phone rings. It's this young woman crying. "My boyfriend is so mad at me because he said 700 isn't enough, and I gave you my cell phone number." It was brilliant. And then the boyfriend cuts in on the call, and he says, "I didn't take your computer. I found it, and I was going to get it back to you. I've just been very busy. I work 2 jobs." So we arranged where we were going to meet. Now, it was a sidewalk cafe. I sat outside. My husband sat inside with his shillelagh. Y'all know what a shillelagh is? It's an Irish walking stick made of very hard wood. The Irish invented it when the British took over and banned firearms for the Irish. So they had these walking sticks that were just as good as a gun. So my husband is in there armed, and I'm out here waiting for the person to come, and he shows up. It took him 2 hours, but he showed up, got my computer, and my day planner, which he also had, which basically was my life. And I was so happy to see him that I ran up and I threw my arms around his neck and I said, "Thank you, this is so great. Do you want a drink?" He said, "Sure." My husband texts me from inside, "I can't believe you are buying the thief a beer." And I texted back, "I'm doing this my way." Well, he told me that taking the money would make him feel cheap. And I said, "I wouldn't want you to feel cheap, but let me certainly pay you for the time that it took to get here, so I got my computer back for $200. I'm walking home with my husband, and he's saying, God really loves you. And I agreed, just went on, and later on in the day, we're on the bus, he says, wow, God really loves you. Yeah, I know. And that night, we're coming home, we're walking down the hallway, and he just says, man, God really loves you. And I said, time out, William. You're an atheist. Now, I highly recommend anybody in the spiritual path have a close relationship with somebody who doesn't believe in anything. I mean, somebody who doesn't believe in any kind of God by any kind of name, somebody who thinks life is just you're here, then you're gone, it doesn't mean anything, because that will really work your spiritual muscles. How much do you really, really trust when you're proving that and showing that to somebody who thinks, you know, you're a great person, you're just a little bit deluded? So I said, William, what is all this God stuff? You don't even believe in God. He said, I know, but he really loves you. You see, God really loves us. And the whole reason for aligning our thoughts and our words and our actions with the divine is so that we can be closer to that, so that we can just be more in communion with all the good stuff and all the sweet stuff. And it doesn't mean nothing bad ever happens. It doesn't mean sometimes the guy who seems like the right one doesn't go to church and hold hands with somebody else. It doesn't mean that sometimes things don't look really awful. But the way things look, the way things are, aren't necessarily, thank God, the same. So you want to fly? You want to fly high? Fly TWA. Align those thoughts and words and actions with the divine, and there's nothing that can get you out of the sky.